Hey, it's Martin Griffiths from Metis Automation, helping manufacturers to visualize and control the products in their factories. And today I'm going to talk about capacity planning for manufacturers. And a little about me before we start. I spent the first 10 years of my career as a manufacturing engineer in some automotive companies, went on to co-found Metis Automation. And since then we've helped manufacturers in over 100 projects now to improve their manufacturing processes. So in this video I want to take some of that expertise and look at the subject of capacity planning. And the reason for that is because it comes up a lot in discussions. So see a lot of manufacturing managers, operations directors and managers just having a lot of frustration, to be honest. And I think there's some trends that have been happening. You know, products are getting more complicated, lead times are reducing, product mix is increasing. All those things fit together to make production planning and capacity planning more complicated. And I think some of the maybe work been possible in the past to get by with paper-based and Excel-based systems. As those things get more complicated, the system starts to struggle and people start to get a bit frustrated. So in this video, I just wanted to go back to some of the principles and techniques of capacity planning, just kind of recap and overview those. Hopefully to give you an idea of what type of technique is a good fit for based on your type of business, and to use that as a tool when going forward and looking at what systems, what things you should be using to better do capacity planning in the future. And some of the information from this video has come from a really good book called Manufacturing Planning and Control Systems by F. Robert Jacob. So there's a good chapter on there on capacity planning. I've kind of just taken out some of the key principles from that and put that in an easy to understand way. So we'll get into some of those topics and techniques now. So the first capacity planning technique is overall factors, and in these techniques I'm going to start off with the simplest and go through to the more complex. Overall factors is the simplest, the quickest and the roughest estimate of doing a capacity plan, and it just uses historical order and labour and machine efficiency data, and just lets you estimate into the future based on those historical trends. So it's very easy and the calculation's quite simple. You're just really using accounting data. And what you would typically do is have a look at the orders you've had, the order volume that you've had like in the past year or past couple of years, see what machine capacity and labour capacity was required to fulfil those orders, and then use that to predict into the future if that order volume is changing, whether you need to increase or decrease your labour or your machine capacity based on that. It's very simple, it's very quick. Would you use it? It's good for manufacturers who have quite short lead times and low work in progress. There can be some inaccuracies in the calculation, but they're minimised if there's low lead times and not much work in progress. So just-in-time manufacturers or supplying to a just-in-time like OEM, this type of calculation is quite a good fit. It doesn't really do any breakdowns of different work centres very well. It just really gives you an overall manufacturing capacity plan. But it's a good first start for getting a rough cut estimate of what you need overall to meet your order volume for the next month, year, that kind of time frame. The second method is capacity bills. This is similar to overall factors. It's still a rough estimating method for the next month, year at a time, but it takes into consideration the different work centres. So this requires a little more information and data going into it. So it needs you to break down the product mix that's going into the bill of materials, and to have routings and to have standard times for each of the operations. And then what you would basically do is take the order volume that's coming into the manufacturing plan, break those products down across the order mix into the times taken to complete each of the operations, multiply it out by the order quantities, and then you can get capacities for each of the work centres that order has to go through, and then an overall total capacity plan for the whole factory. The benefit of a method like this is it does give you more insight into what happens at each work centre, and if you have some specific work centres that are either under or over utilised, it helps you identify bottlenecks up front and maybe shift resources around to flatten that out to help you have a more optimised plan. So situations where you would use it where you have a more complex routing, or where you've tried the total factors method, but you've found some work centres are underutilised, it would then be a good point to go into this. Or where demand isn't as constant, as flat, where it's more cyclical, it helps you again just break your operations down into those different centres. So that's capacity bills, and that's the next stage of capacity planning. The third method is resource profiles, and this is quite similar to capacity bills. It just builds on that next method really. It takes the broken down capacity over work centres, but it then adds in time scheduling. So take for example a product that needs to go a machining operation, then a cleaning operation, then an assembly operation. So the first method probably wouldn't have taken into account the machining for the assembly or the cleaning operation to happen. Machining has to be completed within its time frame, maybe a little dwell in between, then cleaning can happen. Resource profiles will take that scheduling into account, and it will plan it out across the work centres with those kind of staged sequential operations. The benefit of this is you get more accurate capacity planning per workstation. The second method, capacity bills, will probably lead to you underutilising your work centres. Doing resource profiles will make it more likely to get more accurate capacity understanding per work centre, so it'll let you load them more effectively. It's a more complex calculation, and it does require more data going into it to understand what the scheduling should be, but the benefit would be it can help you more effectively utilise your work centres. The situations to use that, I think, are where you have some potential, where you have some clear bottlenecks, and you really want to make some work to optimise those as much as possible. So the fourth method is called capacity requirements planning, and this is quite different to the first three methods. The first three methods could all be done in an Excel spreadsheet really, or with some kind of offline method. Capacity planning requirement is a much more accurate short-term forecasting method. It uses live data from an MRP system. It's based upon the same type of calculations that we talked about in resource profiling, but it takes much more data, so it'll take into account from the MRP system actual orders coming in to the MRP, orders placed for materials. It'll take into account stock that's been already built and available. So for example, if there's some subcomponents that have been built to stock and they're immediately available, it will discount the need to manufacture those. And it can also take into account things like scrap or any components that get used as part of service orders, things like that. So it's a real-time calculation, and it can lead to much more accurate schedules and forecasts down to a daily or weekly schedule. So it can give you much more accurate results, but the downside to it is it requires a live interface to an MRP system, so you have to have that MRP system installed and up to date and accurate, and it requires that data going into it. When to use this? When you've got that up-to-date MRP system and it looks like there's potential to further optimise, and you're looking for that next stage improvement to get your work centres and your factory output optimised, to start bringing your lead times down, and to start bringing your machine and your labour utilisation up. So those were 4 techniques for capacity planning. We can then go on to 2 kind of follow-on topics to that, techniques to that of scheduling. And we've got 2 things to talk about there. We've got finite production scheduling and advanced production scheduling. So let's go into finite production scheduling. This basically leads on to capacity requirements planning, but it's a technique of taking all of the orders in the MRP system and trying to load them into, based on the master production schedule, and basically load them into all of the works orders to come up with a detailed production plan for the whole factory and for every single worker, workstation within that factory, down to every day. So it gives you a kind of a full utilization and a full usable plan to manage your factory week by week, day by day, and week by week. It doesn't do so if you come up with if your capacity plan tells you that you're under or overutilized. It won't really do anything to help you with this, so it's up to you to go in. If you find that there's an underutilization problem and that you have too many orders to be completed this week, but you don't have the capacity, then it will just slot those orders in for the following week or times in the future. That may lead to them being completed after their due date. It will be up to you then to go back into the system and increase capacity by maybe running some overtime shifts, or reordering production to manually move things around. But finite production capacity scheduling will basically just take your capacity plan and slot live orders in as and when it sees capacity for them. An advanced production scheduling system gets used when there's a very complex bill of materials. So a situation that quite frequently happens is end products in a manufacturing company are reliant on kind of sub-assemblies and subcomponents that are also manufactured in-house, that have their own BOMs, their own routings, and that may go down, 1, 2 or 3 levels. Having a system that can kind of drill down and expand all of that is where advanced production scheduling systems come in. Finite planning systems struggle with that, and finite planning systems can only get around that challenge really by adding in extra time, or by adding in under capacity on certain stations just to account for that. Because the issue that happens there is if you have like 5 components that need to go into a product and they're all 90% complete, at that point you don't have any product, because it's only ready to be completed when every last component is finished. Finite production scheduling systems can't cope or process that information, but advanced production scheduling systems will kind of drill down into the full bill of materials, expand it all out, and then come up with a detailed plan with as minimal works in progress and as little time opportunity for error as possible in the schedule to get that completed as fast and as efficiently as possible. It's quite comprehensive, it's quite complex, there's not much room for error, but there can be potentially massive upsides to it. So it's been demonstrated that lead times can be reduced by about 85% using an advanced production scheduling system in situations like this, where there's a complex bill of materials. So there can be massive benefits for using it. However, the other side of that is there can be a fair bit of overhead, and you do need quite a lot of data. The extra amount of data that needs to go into your MRP system and the scheduling system steps up another level. So the benefits are there, but there's some trade-off of extra time and information into setting that up to begin with, to set that all up. So that's advanced production scheduling systems. So let's just recap and summarise what we've talked about in this video. There are 4 methods and techniques of capacity planning. There's overall factors, which is the simplest method. best for just-in-time production where there's short lead times and low works in progress. Next, there's capacity builds, where it breaks down into the different work centres and splits out the routing that helps you when you've got fluctuating order volumes. Next, there's resources profiles, which then takes those work centres and that routing and splits it out sequentially, and that helps you to optimise the capacity utilisation at each of the work centres. And then finally, there's capacity requirements planning, which is the most comprehensive and accurate of the methods, but requires you to have an up-to-date and alive MRP system in place. And then following on from that, there's two production scheduling methods. There's finite capacity scheduling, which takes all the orders from your MLP system and slots them in as soon as possible. And then leading on from that, there's advanced production scheduling systems, where you've got complex products with lots of subcomponents or sub-assemblies. It breaks all that down and leads to much more optimized production scheduling, and potentially can cut your lead times quite significantly. So if you liked today's video, click the like and subscribe button below. You'll get notifications on our next video helping manufacturers. And let me know in the comments below if there's anything which one of these methods you think is most useful to you. We have some templates and some guides for the manufacturing capacity planning methods, and we have some basic Excel calculators for the first three methods. So leave us a comment below if you'd like us to send over that information to you. Hope you enjoyed this and see you next time. Bye.